Let's be real, there comes a moment when the avoidant, the one who distanced themselves, who ran, who ghosted, who said, "I need space, can't stop thinking about you." At first, they were so sure of their choice, cold, silent, detached, but silence has a way of getting loud. And the moment they realize you're really gone, that's when the thoughts start hitting them like waves they can't outrun. You see, avoidants think they're protecting themselves. They tell themselves they're fine without closeness, without vulnerability. But the truth is, they care deeply. That's why they push people away. It's not a lack of feeling, it's too much feeling. But when you stop chasing, when you stop proving your worth, when you reclaim your energy and choose yourself, that's when their mind starts replaying every word you said, every moment you shared. That's when they can't escape the thought of you. And here's the wild part, they didn't expect it. Because they thought you'd always be there, but you chose growth, you chose healing, you chose silence over begging. That power, it echoes louder than any words you could have spoken. If you're wondering whether they miss you, stop. They do, but it's not your job to wait. It's your job to live, because your absence is teaching them what your presence never could. When someone with an avoidant attachment style distances themselves, it's easy to assume they don't care. Their actions scream detachment, their silence feels like rejection. But what most people don't realize is that avoidance isn't rooted in a lack of emotion. It's rooted in fear. An avoidant person often feels overwhelmed by emotional closeness, not because they don't value it, but because they don't know how to handle the intensity that comes with it. Deep down, they care, often more than they can express or admit. But caring that deeply feels dangerous to them. It threatens the walls they've spent years building to protect themselves from hurt, abandonment, or disappointment. From the outside, they might look unaffected, unbothered, completely fine, but internally, they're engaging in a mental battle. When someone starts getting close, it triggers old wounds, often from childhood or past relationships, where closeness led to pain. So instead of embracing the connection, they create distance. Not because they want to lose the person, but because they believe space equals safety. They convince themselves that they're better off alone, that emotional independence means freedom, but the cost of that freedom is often deep loneliness, regret, and missed opportunities for genuine love. The push-pull dynamic is common here. They pull away just when things start to feel good. Just when vulnerability is required. They ghost, they go silent, they avoid difficult conversations. Not because they're heartless, but because facing those emotions head-on feels unbearable. They don't know how to say, "I'm scared," or "this matters to me more than I'm comfortable with." So, they say nothing, they vanish. And when the other person finally gives up or stops reaching out, the avoidant is left with the space they thought they needed, only to find that space filled with anxiety, guilt, and endless thoughts of the person they pushed away. This is where the confusion lies for so many who have loved an avoidant. How can someone who claimed to care disappear so easily? But the disappearance isn't easy for them. It's a defense mechanism. It's an emotional shutdown to avoid confronting what they feel unequipped to manage. Underneath that exterior is someone who is wrestling with the very thing they fear the most: emotional dependence. They believe needing someone is weakness. They equate vulnerability with danger, and so they escape, until the thought of you becomes so loud that it can't be silenced. What they don't realize in the moment is that their attempt to control emotion by avoiding it actually magnifies it over time. Suppressed feelings don't disappear, they intensify. And the more they try not to think about you, the more you occupy their mind. They start remembering the comfort, the stability, the genuine connection. But by then, the damage may already be done. The tragedy of avoidance is that it often causes people to lose the very relationships that had the potential to heal them. All because they were too afraid to feel. There's something powerful about silence, especially when it comes from someone who used to fight for the connection. Show up constantly and try to fix things over and over again. When you finally stop chasing and avoidant, when you go quiet after giving your all, your silence begins to echo louder than any words ever could. Avoidant individuals are often accustomed to people trying to get through to them. They expect the apologies, the explanations, the attempts to mend what's broken. But when that noise stops, when your voice is no longer in their world, it creates a void they didn't anticipate. In the beginning, they might convince themselves they're relieved. That silence might feel like a win to them, a break from the intensity they felt in the relationship. But as the days pass and your energy stays withdrawn, your absence becomes a mirror. Suddenly, there's nothing to distract them from their own thoughts. They don't hear your reassurances, your concerns, or your love, and that quiet becomes deafening. What they once viewed as space turns into loneliness. What they believed was emotional freedom turns into reflection, then discomfort. That silence starts to haunt them because it marks a shift. You've stopped playing the role they took for granted. You're no longer the one texting first, keeping the connection alive, or filling in the emotional blanks they refuse to address. And this change isn't just about your behavior. It signals your growth. It shows you've stopped fighting for someone who kept shutting you out. That silence says, asterisk, I'm done proving my worth to someone who couldn't see it. Asterisk, and those unspoken words carry more weight than any message you could send. Avoidants often don't understand the gravity of what they've lost until they feel the full impact of your absence. They may not immediately admit it or act on it, but the shift is internal. The same walls they built to protect themselves now become their prison. They start wondering what you're doing, if you still care, if someone else is hearing your laughter, receiving your attention. The imagination fills in the gaps, and suddenly, the control they thought they had begins to slip. Because your silence forces them to sit with everything they've been avoiding: emotion, loss, vulnerability. People often assume that staying silent means you're weak or giving up. But in truth, it's the strongest move you can make when dealing with someone who needs distance to realize what they had. It allows you to reclaim your energy and stop bleeding for someone who wouldn't stop their own emotional bleeding. Your silence is not punishment, it's protection, it's healing, it's self-respect. And in that quiet, the avoidant finally hears the consequences of their behavior. Not through confrontation, not through conflict, but through the powerful, piercing message of your absence. Avoidants often live with an unconscious belief that the people they push away will still be there when they decide to come back. It's not arrogance, it's conditioning. They've learned that distance doesn't always mean disconnection, that love will wait, that silence doesn't end relationships, especially when they've been with someone who overcompensates for their emotional withdrawal. So, when you were still showing up despite their detachment, still reaching out when they went quiet, still forgiving when they shut down emotionally, they started to believe your love was constant, something guaranteed, something they didn't have to nurture or protect, because it would always be there. They believed you'd be there through the silence, through the hot and cold behavior, through their self-isolating patterns. And for a while, maybe you were. But every time they pulled away, you chipped away a little more of your energy, your hope, your willingness to stay. And when that energy finally ran out, when you stopped responding, stopped chasing, stopped caring in the way you once did, they were met with a reality they didn't see coming. You were no longer holding the door open. You weren't there waiting on the other side. You left, not with anger, not with a dramatic exit, but with quiet finality. That's when something shifts inside the avoidant. The absence hits differently when it's permanent. At first, they might not fully grasp it. They'll assume it's another one of your silent phases, something temporary. But as time stretches on and they don't hear from you, it starts to settle in. You've really changed. You're no longer available to carry the emotional weight of the relationship. You're no longer interested in proving yourself to someone who didn't value your presence when it mattered most. This unexpected silence doesn't just confuse them. It destabilizes their illusion of control. Avoidance like predictability. They want emotional safety without emotional vulnerability. But when your behavior no longer fits the pattern they relied on, it forces them to face an uncomfortable truth. They didn't expect to lose you. They didn't expect your silence to be final. And they certainly didn't expect you to thrive without them. Their thoughts begin to circle back. They remember the times you were there, the support you gave, the way you loved them with patience and consistency. They start replaying the moments they brushed you off, minimized your feelings, or disappeared when things got intense. And now there's no one there to reassure them, no one filling in the silence. That absence becomes loud. It becomes a presence of its own. So while they believed they could retreat and return at will, what they find instead is the echo of what they took for granted. That echo reminds them of what they had, what they avoided, and ultimately what they lost. And that realization cuts deeper than any goodbye ever could. When the avoidant is finally left alone, when the texts stop, the calls fade, and the energy that used to orbit around them disappears, they're forced into a space they spend most of their life trying to avoid, solitude filled with emotional weight. At first, they may relish the space. It feels familiar, safe, controlled, but emotional avoidance is only effective when there's noise and distraction to drown out the feelings they don't want to face. Without your presence as a buffer, without your attention as a balm, they find themselves stuck in a quiet that quickly turns unsettling. In that silence, their mind begins to wander, not lightly, deeply. They begin to revisit memories they didn't fully process when they happened. That moment you looked at them with disappointment, the time you pulled back just a little, and they ignored the warning signs, the conversations they dismissed, the patience you showed even when you were hurting. It all begins to replay in their mind not as fragments, but as vivid moments that now hold weight. When someone is alone with their regret, they can no longer rationalize it away. There's no one to blame in the silence. No argument, no tension. Just them, sitting with the echo of everything they didn't say, didn't do, or failed to appreciate. Regret has a sharp voice, and it becomes especially loud when someone realizes they contributed to their own heartbreak. For avoidants who pride themselves on being emotionally self-contained, that realization is incredibly destabilizing. They thought they could manage the loss. They thought they didn't need the connection. But now, they're haunted by the ghost of what once felt solid, the things they used to take for granted. Your messages, your warmth, your availability are now noticeable in their absence. That's when the thought of you becomes inescapable. It doesn't arrive all at once. It sneaks in, a smell that reminds them of you, a place you used to go together, a song that randomly plays and brings a lump to their throat they weren't prepared for. Their body remembers the comfort, the routine, the emotional shelter you unknowingly provided. And now, with nothing left to distract them, they realize they miss you not out of convenience, but from a place of deep emotional longing. That longing wasn't accessible to them before because they were too afraid to feel it. But now that there's no one left to hold off the emotions, they come rushing in. This is where regret turns into reflection. They may begin to ask themselves hard questions they spent so long avoiding. Why did I pull away? Why couldn't I express what I felt? Why did I treat someone I cared about like they were replaceable? Those questions don't have easy answers, but the torment lies in the fact that they finally want to answer them. When it's too late to fix what was broken, the thought of you doesn't just visit them. It lingers, settling into their mind like a truth they can no longer ignore. It's natural to wonder what the avoidant is thinking or feeling once you've gone silent, especially after everything you invested emotionally. But the truth is, their thoughts, whether full of longing, confusion, or regret, are no longer your responsibility. For a long time, you may have centered your healing around the possibility of their realization. You might have stayed emotionally stuck, hoping they'd reach out, apologize, or change. But real healing doesn't come from waiting for someone to understand your worth. It comes from realizing it yourself and moving forward even if they never do. Avoidants often need time and distance to process what they feel. They may eventually miss you. They may wrestle with guilt and wish they'd done things differently. But by the time that clarity arrives for them, you might already be in a different place. Emotionally, mentally, spiritually, you've outgrown the dynamic that once kept you small, confused, and constantly seeking validation. That evolution is yours, and it doesn't depend on whether they ever come back or not. Your growth is not about proving anything to them. It's about liberating yourself from the emotional roller coaster and reclaiming your energy. You are not responsible for their emotional development. You are not their lesson to learn through heartbreak. You are not the consequence they needed to feel in order to become better. You're a person with your own needs, dreams, and future to protect. And staying stuck in the loop of their behavior keeps you from stepping into that next chapter of your life. Yes, they may think about you often. They may scroll through old photos, reread conversations, or check your social media in the silence of the night. But what does that change for you if their thoughts don't come with action, accountability, or emotional maturity? Then it's nothing more than noise, echoes of what could have been. Letting go doesn't mean you didn't love them. It means you loved yourself enough to stop holding space for someone who kept pushing you away. It means you finally understood that waiting for someone else to value you was keeping you from valuing yourself. And in that space of letting go, something powerful happens. You begin to rediscover the parts of yourself that were hidden beneath the effort to be chosen. You begin to speak to yourself with kindness instead of criticism. You start building a life where emotional safety isn't a negotiation, it's a requirement. Their thoughts may catch up with them long after you've stopped looking back. They may miss the way you loved, supported, and understood them. But don't confuse their realization with your responsibility. You're not required to reopen the door just because they finally recognize its value. Your job is to protect your peace, maintain your boundaries, and honor how far you've come. Your healing journey deserves to be centered around your growth, not their delay. And in the end, that's where your real power lies, not in being remembered by them, but in remembering yourself. In the end, when the avoidant can no longer escape the thought of you, it's not your silence that speaks the loudest, it's your growth, your self-respect, and your decision to choose yourself. You were never meant to wait for someone to wake up to your worth. You were meant to remember it on your own. Thank you for showing up for yourself, for letting go of what hurt, and for walking forward even when it was hard. Keep rising, because the love you gave to them is now the love you give to you.